if not for my LSD experience in 1972. I like to think I can pinpoint the exact moment my life took a sharp left turn. 1972, staring at a prism of colors that had once been my backyard, experiencing a total mind-bending revelation under the influence of LSD. Up until then, I had always shrugged off talk of oneness or universal connection as hippie babble. But there in that moment, everything I'd known or believed got overturned in the space of a single cosmic exhalation. Let me paint a bit of background. I'm a baby boomer, born in the early 1950s. My mother was the kind of woman who never ventured far from her hometown or her ingrained notions about who fit where in the social order. She wasn't particularly educated, and, looking back, she had strong racist undertones in her worldview. My father, on the other hand, was far more educated and, by default, more open-minded. For a while, they coexisted in a marriage that might have seemed normal from the outside. But eventually, in 1963, the strain got to be too much, and they divorced shortly after moving us back to Southern California. I was still a kid at the time, so I absorbed all their disagreements and prejudices in half-baked ways. I was left with this odd mix of paternal broad-mindedness and maternal bigotry swirling in my head, never quite knowing which side to land on. During the mid-1960s, I adopted a surfer's lifestyle, which automatically placed me in the realm of rebels and outsiders. Where I lived, surfers didn't have the squeaky clean beach party image that might exist in pop culture. We were more like the group that the proper kids rolled their eyes at, though it wasn't half as rebellious as it might be seen today. But we sure felt rebellious. For me, surfing was an escape, a way to harness the ocean's energy instead of dealing with the messy dryness of life on land. I was out there nearly every morning if the swells were decent, and if not, I'd sit on the beach, stare at the horizon, occasionally light up a joint if my buddies had one to share. I can remember weed being a sort of communal bond, a subculture staple that ironically never felt as taboo as it should have, given my mother's moral panic about drugs. People talk about the late 60s and early 70s as an era of free love, hippies, anti-war protests, mind expansion. I was tangentially aware of the national news, Vietnam, civil rights marches, Nixon controversies. But in my day-to-day life, it was mostly me, some friends, and the surf. We had small get-togethers, smoked a lot of weed, occasionally tried some new drug if it passed through our circle. LSD was out there in the cultural ether, and while I was curious, I was also somewhat dismissive. I heard talk about it, expanding your mind, but I considered that a load of nonsense. As far as I was concerned, my entire life's path was laid out. You get born, you go to school, you get a job, you find a mate, you have kids, you retire, you die. Period. I was neither rebellious enough to throw that script away, nor was I so square that I avoided partying. But I was rigid in my philosophy about how society was meant to function. Some blend of my father's academic worldview and my mother's old-school cynicism. Then came the day that changed everything, courtesy of my two best surfer pals. They had discovered LSD before me. They swore up and down that it opened them to the notion of cosmic unity, that we're all interconnected beings, that love is this profound force tying the entire universe together. They'd talk about it in such earnest tones, telling me I was missing out on revelations about the illusions we live under. For a while, I just teased them. You guys been reading too much spiritual mumbo-jumbo. It's a pipe dream. Or I'd brush it off. You're just stoned and in some heady daydream. But I could see they were different, like their eyes held a deeper calm, or they carried themselves with unusual serenity. Finally, one afternoon, they cornered me on the beach after a surf session, proposing we take LSD together. They wanted me to see for myself what they'd been trying to describe. I remember feeling a swirl of contradictory emotions: curiosity, skepticism, a bit of fear. Yet, my rebellious surfer side overcame the caution, and I agreed. So we set it up. Nothing fancy, just the three of us at someone's place, each taking a tab. We waited for it to kick in, drifting from conversation to conversation. The first half hour felt like typical mild anticipation. Colors slightly brighter, that initial wave of euphoria creeping into my limbs. I began to giggle at nothing. My two friends were used to it, so they guided me. Relax. Let it flow. They wanted me to be open to the experience. Then the LSD really took hold. Suddenly the world around me began pulsing with an intensity I'd never imagined. The walls breathed. The air shimmered. Every leaf on the trees outside glowed with vitality. It was undeniably beautiful, but also disorienting. I must have turned pale, because my friends patted me on the back, ensuring me it was all right to just go with it. In that moment, my mind was still clinging to its old logic. No, this can't be real, I told myself. I was about to protest, to say something along the lines of, "You're crazy, you realize that, right? We're not all one. That's just drug talk." But halfway through forming that thought, everything shifted. A wave of understanding washed over me. So profound it's hard to put into words. It was like my eyes saw beyond their usual range. Particles of light or energy seemed to dance in the air, connecting the trees, the grass, me, my friends. I perceived a unity of existence in a single breath. The lines separating me from my surroundings blurred, dissolved. The LSD had swept away my rigid sense of self, revealing something infinitely larger, more harmonious. My heart pounded, but not with fear, more like awe. I looked at my friends, who were gazing at me with knowing smiles, as if to say, "Yes, there it is. You see it now." It hit me that the surface-level divisions we cling to, people versus us, nature, me or us, you, were illusions we unconsciously maintain for comfort in. In that heightened state, I saw life itself as an orchestrated dance of energy. My friends tried putting words to it. We are all one. Love flows through everything. Suddenly, those phrases I'd mocked made perfect sense. I felt that love tangibly. It was almost a physical pressure, radiating outward, connecting everything to everything else. For the first time, I felt a wave of compassion that wasn't just for people I liked, but for the entire living cosmos. However, as ecstatic as that realization was, it also frightened me. My entire worldview had gotten turned on its head. I found myself repeating, "Oh God, I can't unsee this." I worried that if I fell asleep, maybe I'd revert to my old ways. So I stayed up the entire night, eyes wide, occasionally letting out exclamations or tears. My friends nodding at me like, "Well, we've been there." By dawn, I was exhausted but still riding that wave of epiphany. The sun rose, painting the sky with pastel pinks and oranges, and in that moment, the sunrise felt like an affirmation. Like the universe saying, we exist in endless possibility, and we do so together. That was 1972. I look back now and think, what if that had never happened? I suspect I'd have marched along, content in my limited viewpoint, never challenging the subtle racism my mother instilled, or the strict American dream sequence I'd grown comfortable with. I might easily have devolved into the type of old baby boomer who's consumed by conspiracy theories and knee-jerk nationalism. Those fake patriots, the canon crowd, the ones raging about immigrants or living for cheap political drama. Maybe I'd be spouting hateful nonsense, so cocksure that I was the righteous one in the room. Honestly, it's not a stretch. You see, I had that in me. I recognized that same arrogance and bigotry in my mother. Absent that LSD experience, I'd never have questioned my inherited biases with such depth. The aftermath of my trip wasn't a neat conclusion. Realizing we are all one sounds poetic, but integrating that into daily life is challenging. I spent months, years really, trying to live in accordance with that new perspective. I read voraciously. Works on Eastern philosophy, Western mysticism, anything that might help articulate the sense of unity I'd experienced. Meanwhile, I was still physically in a regular life, helping out with tasks, going to small job gigs, mulling over whether to go to college. My mother scorned the changes in me, calling me another hippie bum. My father, though open-minded, was still somewhat baffled by how drastically my outlook shifted. I guess I wasn't the same reserved, suburban-bound kid anymore. One might think I'd become a super lazy slacker, but ironically, I found I wanted to do something that contributed to society's well-being, some expression of the oneness I'd felt. I got involved in volunteer work, tried to use my time to help others in small ways. Surfing turned spiritual for me. Each wave was a microcosm of cosmic flow. I know that sounds cheesy, but it was how I processed it. Over time, though, the world gave me other challenges, heartbreaks, economic stresses, what have you. My sense of cosmic wonder didn't vanish, but it got tested repeatedly by the ordinary grind of life. Now skip forward decades. I'm older, and I see how the baby boomer generation branched off in multiple directions. Some ended up on the far right, championing borderline fascist ideologies or fueling these outlandish conspiracies that revolve around scapegoating. Others stayed liberal but got jaded. Meanwhile, I continue to watch the news, sometimes disheartened at how fractious we've become as a society. That LSD insight about we're all one can sound naive in a world that's perpetually at each other's throats, but I hold on to it. If I'm honest, I hold on to it almost stubbornly, because if not for that realization, I'd probably be just as lost, maybe shouting the loudest about fake news, or praising some narcissistic politician. At one point, I discovered the notion of the 100th monkey phenomenon. This idea that once enough individuals adopt a new behavior or insight, it spontaneously spreads to the rest of the population. I believed for a while that if enough of us realized the truth about oneness, the rest of humanity would swiftly catch on. Yet that never happened on the scale I'd hoped. Instead, the last few decades appear to have deepened our divides in many respects, though I also see pockets of extraordinary kindness and global connectivity. It's a paradox. We're more connected technologically, but we're also fracturing in ideology. The LSD lesson taught me that life is ephemeral, illusions abound, and we co-create reality. So I keep a measure of optimism. If illusions can be formed, illusions can be dispelled too. For me, life is an illusion, isn't some throwaway line. It's a recognition that what we call the real world is shaped by our collective beliefs, our cultural narratives, our ingrained biases. If you shift your perspective radically, like LSD did for me, you see a different world altogether. That's where the love piece enters. A sense that behind our illusions there's a unifying compassion, an energy that flows among us if we let it. Sure, maybe that sounds hippy-dippy, but the LSD trip hammered it in so viscerally that it stayed with me, overshadowing cynicism. So while the daily news might be grim, I still sense a deeper current pulling us forward, however slowly. When I reflect on the LSD trip itself, a part of me remains astonished at how swiftly that mental transformation came. One moment, I was me, young, naive, self-assured of my typical American future. And the next, it was as if cosmic curtains parted. That vantage point never fully disappeared. Even when I had to do mundane things, pay bills, fix a leaky sink, I was aware on some level that we're all part of an interconnected tapestry, that the table I'm sitting at, or the water I'm drinking, is part of the same cosmic system. That sense of wonder has made me more empathetic, or so I like to think. And maybe that empathy is precisely why I didn't turn into a resentful older man complaining about everything that threatens my worldview. Because the LSD taught me to question the lines we draw. National borders, racial categories, political allegiances, these are constructs. Without that LSD awakening, I might have latched onto them wholeheartedly, swallowing some conservative or reactionary dogma. As decades passed, I encountered other spiritual frameworks that resonated with the LSD epiphany. I read Buddhist teachings about emptiness, the notion that we are illusions forming a shared consciousness. I dabbled in yoga. Occasionally, I listened to Terence McKenna or Alan Watts recordings, finding echoes of my own revelations in their words. None of it replaced the original LSD experience, but it all wove together, reinforcing the knowledge that, yes, we're not separated from each other in the fundamental sense. Meanwhile, I see so many of my generational peers remain stuck in fear-based thinking, demonizing those who look or believe differently. I imagine the younger me pre-LSD could have easily slipped into that camp, and it chills me. It underscores just how pivotal that trip was. That's why I say, if not for LSD, there go I. It's not hyperbole. I consider it a real possibility that I'd have joined the ranks of those shouting about conspiracies, forging illusions of US versus us, them, latching onto authoritarian figures who promise certainty. It's not that LSD is a guaranteed gateway to enlightenment for everyone, but for me, it was the catalyst. It cracked the shell of my preconceived notions and forced me to see beyond. Of course, LSD is not something I'd glorify blindly. It can be dangerous in the wrong context, can unhinge the unready mind. But for me, at that time, it became a crucial turning point, and I realize it's not about LSD as a substance alone. Psychedelics just open a door. The transformation arises from whether you walk through that door, reflect upon what you see, and integrate the lessons. That's what I spent 5 decades doing, peeling back layers of illusions. I'm telling this story not as a prescription for others, but as a testament to how one moment can drastically alter your path. Right now, I watch the news, watch online forums, and see so much division. People cling to their tribal identities, their political dogmas, building narratives that pit them against perceived enemies. I can't help but think, if only they felt, even for a moment, that sense of universal connection I experienced, maybe they'd let go of some fear, some hate. Then again, maybe they'd interpret that cosmic unity in their own twisted ways. Hard to say. Humans are complicated creatures, but this remains my truth. The LSD trip revealed a dimension of reality I was blind to. It wasn't just pretty colors or kaleidoscopic visuals. It was an intense, soul-gripping realization that everything's connected, that love is not a mere sentiment, but an underlying current of existence. It gave me a vantage from which to see the illusions we feed ourselves. And for that, I'm eternally grateful, because I could easily see how, absent that, I'd be an older man waving a flag and cursing at immigrants or spouting conspiracies about how they are destroying the country. My mother's racism might have taken deeper root in me. My father's mild liberalism might have overshadowed or been overshadowed by some cultural wave of resentment. Instead, I remain humbly tethered to the knowledge that we share more in common than we think. So if I come off as idealistic or mystical, so be it. The harshness of the world doesn't negate that we co-create it. The illusions are ours to maintain or dismantle. If a single LSD trip can jolt a stubborn, moderately racist, close-minded surfer kid into a vantage of cosmic unity, that's evidence enough for me that consciousness can shift in the blink of an eye. The seeds of universal compassion can sprout in the unlikeliest soil. Sure, it didn't transform the entire world. People remain locked in cycles of negativity. But for me, it's a personal revolution that shaped how I treat others, how I view life, how I approach the madness of modern society. I look around now, and though I see so many lost in conspiracies or hatred, I'm reminded that illusions can be undone. And my LSD revelation taught me at least that love and connectedness are real forces, ones that can be seen if you tear away the layers of cultural conditioning. That's enough to keep me hopeful, even in bleak times. Sure, it's not a universal fix, but if it changed me so radically, maybe others can find their own path, with or without psychedelics, to realize the oneness behind our diverse experiences. So that's my short tale, a baby boomer, shaped by a half-racist, half-liberal upbringing, drifting into a standard American life only to be rerouted by an acid trip in 1972. The result, a persistent sense that we are indeed all one, that love is a powerful cosmic truth, and that illusions abound in our daily life. I haven't always lived up to that insight. Human flaws remain, but it undergirds everything I do. And each day I remind myself that absent that fateful dose of LSD, I might be a very different person, possibly among the crowd I now regard with pity and frustration. Those who weaponize fear, who spew conspiracies, who mistake the illusions for ultimate reality. Instead, I remain thankful that the experience cracked me open, set me on a path of continued questioning, and allowed me to see life's interconnected tapestry. That's a gift I carry every day, no matter how chaotic the world becomes.